Okay, welcome everyone. As we learn the segment, which is known as For the Shabbos Table, and this segment is made possible by a grant by the Rubin family, which asks us to pray for them that they should be zeicher to a ben zacher, to a healthy male child, and of course for the schus that they should have Shlach in Ruchnius and Gashmius. It's amazing. I look at the now I have a they send me a dashboard in TorahAnytime.com, and I see that this year is watched, even though it's aired so late in the week, it's watched by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world just on Torah Anytime, and that's besides Kalalashin and all the other carriers. So their schus is very, very big. Yetz Hashem, starting next week, we're going to be broadcasting from South Fallsburg, and we are looking for a sponsor for the Chumash on Shlach, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. Also join us for our Daf Yomi. Daf Yomi is at 5 to 9, Motzei Shabbos at 10:45 at zoomdaf.com. It says in this week's parasha, the parasha of Tzitzis. And in the parasha of Tzitzis, it says, V'lo yisasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem. You should not follow your heart and your eyes, asher atem zonim achreihem, which you lust after them. So, the order of this pasuk is very questionable. When I say questionable, of course it's accurate, but questionable means questionable in our minds. Because the Gemara always says that the order is the reverse. Ayin raya v'leiv chaymed. The eye sees and then the heart desires. So it should say v'lo yisasuru achrei einechem v'achrei levavchem. And yet that's not what the pasuk says. It says v'lo yisasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem. You shouldn't go after your hearts. And then it says after your eyes. So why is that? So it's interesting that they have preserved the siddur that the Gra, that the Heilige Vilna Gaon, Zechat Tzav Kodesh Brachas Chusi Yagan Aleinu, his personal siddur, and they say that on the margin of Achrei Levavchem, the Achrei Einechem, it says these three words, Mipnei Maaseh Shahay, because of the incident that happened. Now, we've spoken about this incident recently. We learned it in the Chak. We learned it in Chak a few weeks ago. It was on day 5 when we learned Kachim. So it cited the Gemara in Menachos on Daf Mem Daled, where the Gemara tells us over there that there was a man that was very careful with the mitzvah of tzitzis, and he heard that there was a legendary, beautiful Zaina on one of the islands. And she was so expensive that she charged for her servant 400 gold denarii. He was a wealthy man, so he sent her the 400 gold denarii, and she booked him a day. Now, when he came, she set many beds, and he had to climb up silver beds until he got up to the gold bed where she was awaiting him unclothed. And as he was sitting with her and disrobing, his tzitzis banged him in the face. And it woke him up. And he went down. And she came down and she said to him, I implore you to tell me what blemish you saw in me, that you're rejecting me after paying me all the money. He said, I never saw a more beautiful woman in my life, but we have a mitzvah tzitzis, And it's to remind us, so she said, give me the name of your town and the name of your rabbi. And he left, and unbeknownst to him, she liquidated her property. She gave a third to the government that they shouldn't give her trouble. And she gave a third to the poor, and she took a third, and she took all the beds and all her jewelry, and she was Megayah. And then came to the man's town and looked up the Rebbe and said she wants to convert. He says, maybe you have an eye for one of the men. So she told him the story, and he saw her sincerity, and he said, Biti, my daughter, take mikchacha, take your merchandise. And they got married. And the Gemara tells us all those beds that she set for him, be'isr, in a prohibited way, now she set for him in heter. So the Gaon says that it's referring to this story, because over here his heart wanted it before he ever set his eyes on her. He heard about her in the faraway islands, and he booked the reservation with her. So here it was Achrei Levavchem first, and then V'achrei Einechem. So that's what the Gaon says. That's why the pasuk has it in this order. Now, of course, the Gaon doesn't mean just because of this one story. If you look in Rav Leibel Katz's magnificent sefer, Sechet Tzadik Levracha Zchusa Yagen Aleinu Oyel Aryeh, and he doesn't cite this Gaon, and he doesn't cite this Gemara in Menachos. But if you look at this, if you look at the Oyel Aryeh, he says that the reason why the pasuk says Achrei Levavchem first is because many times living in a promiscuous society, living in a hedonistic, lewd society, people talk. They could talk about singers, and they could talk about different things, and because of the atmosphere and environment that people live in, people will then be motivated to take a look for themselves. And Rav Leibel Katz says that's why it says Achrei Levavchem V'achrei Einechem, because of the free, immoral society that we live in, and because of all the talk amongst people, their heart might desire to make them look. That's what Rav Leibel Katz says. And he goes on to say, look what the impact of society is. During the Dor HaMabel, even the animals started mating with different kinds. Because they were mushpa, they were influenced, and the animals don't have a Yetzer Hara, but they became so influenced from the promiscuous society that they live in. That's how careful we have to be in today's society. Now, of course, there's another famous answer. I believe that this answer was given by the Shlach HaKadosh. I'm not sure if it was the Shlach HaKadosh or the Alshich. Either one. But they say that as follows, that no one could hold us accountable for the first look. You're walking in the street. You can't look down because you're going to trip. So you look and you see a scantily clad female. Now comes the test if you're going to take a second look. So that's why it says, Lo yisasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem. Because the test isn't first from the eyes, because the first look wasn't your fault. You look, there's a big billboard, and it's really, really, really immodest. Do you take another look? So on that it says, Lo yisasuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem. Don't let your heart convince you to take a second look. So that's why it says levavchem first, and only afterwards einechem. Now, The truth of the matter is that this question is really not a strong question, because there's another meaning to this verse, which is cited in the Gemara. V'lo yisasuru achrei levavchem, you shouldn't stray after your heart. Zu minus, this refers to heresy. V'achrei nechem, and after your eyes, that refers to lust. So then it's no question, because achrei levavchem is not talking about lust. It's talking about heresy. It's talking about minus. It's talking about you shouldn't follow after heretical views. You shouldn't follow after heretical views. But on this, the great gain, and I always tell you this, I always get the chills when I mention something from Rav Elchanan Wasserman. Rav Elchanan Wasserman perished in the gas chambers, like my Zayda, like my Baba, Zichron Livracha. But he didn't have to. He was already ensconced in the safety of America. He was collecting in America for Baranovich. But he went back into the inferno, because a captain doesn't abandon his ship. And he went to his death. He went to death al Kiddush Hashem. So this is coming from Auschwitz. His lips move in the kever, in the grave. Rabbi Chanan asks an obvious question. Rabbi Chanan says, heresy is not the heart. Heresy is the mayach, is the mind. Why does it say thoughts of heresy is an intellectual error, not a heart error. So it should say you shouldn't go after your mind, not after your heart. So Rabbi Chanan says a big yesod over here. He says intellectually, there's no big test to believe in God. Like the Gemara says that a min asked Rabbi Akiva, how do you know that there's a God? The min, some say min is Mem Yud Nun, stands for Maimin Yeshu Noitzvi, those that believe in the early Christians. But the min asked Rabbi Akiva, how do you know that there's a God? So he asked him as follows. This is the lashon of the Medrash. Mi bara ha'olam, who created the world? So Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, God. Amalei her'eni davar bara, show me God in a clear way. So Rabbi Akiva, it's interesting, the Medrash says that Rabbi Akiva didn't even address the min, because he knew he wouldn't listen. Amar Rabbi Akiva l'talmidav, Rabbi Akiva addressed his disciples. Kishem sha'talis me'ida al ha'oyreg, just like a talis proves that there was a seamstress, and v'abayis me'ida al ha'banoi, and a house proves that there was a builder. Kacha oila me'id al ha'kadosh baruch. So the world proves unquestionably that there's a God. Unquestionably. You know that the term Elohim is a composite of two words. Mi Eila. Whose are these? Aleph Lamed Hey Yud Mem spells Mi Eila. Whose are these? Like it says, Su'u einechem l'maram. Lift your eyes on heaven. Uru'u mi bara'ela. Who put the sun? Exactly 92 million? 93.5 million miles, perfectly calibrated away from Earth. A ball of sun put with its gravitational exactness, put in a place that nobody has to squint during the day, any place on earth. Perfectly positioned for its photosynthesis of the plants, the moon calibrated to control the tides. Just look, Mi'ela, whose are these? It's not a question. So he says intellectually it's not a big thing. But what is it? So Rabbi Chanan quotes a Gemara. Lo yavdu Yisrael al avodah zarah ela kedei lahatir lahem haroyos. Klal Yisrael didn't worship idolatry except to be able to practice immorality. You look at Greek mythology. They have gods that did incest. They had gods that did homosexuality. Because if it's okay for the gods, it's okay for us. He said that the reason why people follow heresy is not because of an intellectual decision. It's because of the heart. The heart wants to sin. The heart doesn't want to be restricted. So you have so many of these children that are off the derech. Right? If they listen to podcasts and they say, yeah, there's no God, it's evolution, it's this, it's that, it's over hundreds of millions of years, so then they could do whatever they want. They're not restricted. So it's because the heart wants it. Rav Moshe said, what is it that we say that if you leave wine open and a guy touches it, it's yayin nesach? What the guy is so from that right away is thinking it's a libation for his God. I mean, the answer is the guy wanted to go to the bar in the night. But his wife says, what do you mean? I want you home. Help me with the children. No, he turned it into a religious practice. You turn it into a religious practice, then you could go out to the bar. The leiv is chaymed, the heart desires. And that's why they say over that when there is Shiva Volozhin, a young man that went off the derech said, when he saw his Rosh Hashiva, he said, I have many questions. So he says, I'll answer questions, but I can't answer answers. What you're doing is you're looking for answers to explain your behavior. I can't answer your answers. If you really have questions, I could answer them. But it's not intellectual questions. It's answers to be able to continue your life of liberalism, of emancipation, and lack of spirituality. And that's why v'lo yisesuru achrei levavchem means minus, and not achrei moichachem, after your minds. It's not really a challenge to the mind. I want to tell you a big chiddush that I saw in the Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra is one of the Rishonim on the page in the Chumash. V'lo yisesuru achrei levavchem v'achrei einechem asher atem zonim achreihem leman tizkeru v'asisem es kol mitzvosei. We say this every day, once in the day, once in the night. Some say it before they go to sleep. The Ibn Ezra says that you should look at your tzitzis. V'lo yirdaf adam achrei hirur libay, and a person shouldn't chase after the wants of his heart. V'lo yirdaf l'kol asher yish'alu einav, and he shouldn't chase after all that his eyes desire. So the Ibn Ezra is taking this out of the strict realm of immorality. He's saying that our eyes in a materialistic world We got big eyes. And people have a lot of wants. They have a lot of wants. They see their friends have big houses with swimming pools and tennis courts. They see they have summer homes and winter homes, and they go on cruises. And people have all kinds of desires. He says the tzitzis are supposed to ground us. Don't run after all these desires. Don't forget there's a lot to be done. If you're going to run after and you're going to try just to have such chemdas hamammon, because you need this and you need that and you need this and you need that, what's going to be with all the mitzvahs? That's what the tzitzis is supposed to remind you, that you're an Eved Hashem, that you're a servant of Hashem. Don't run after achrei levavchem, all the desires of your heart and all the desires of your eyes. It's a more... But I don't mean to imply that it's not talking about immorality. After your eyes, we live in a time that eye candy is all over us. Every time we open a computer, every time we go into a mall, it's all over. The Charedim says in Perek Samach Vav, imagine if a man would give somebody 1,000 servants. Wow. And he asks him, you know what, give me 2 of them back. So what kind of a fool wouldn't give 2 back? He says, Hashem gave us 248 limbs. Reish Mem Ches Eivarim. He says, 2 of the Eivarim I want you to really dedicate to me. Your heart and your eyes. It will be a fool, a person that's not careful with that. That's what the Charedim says. But listen to what the Chassam Sofer says in the Akdama to the Chassam Sofer al HaTorah. Now, Chassam Sofer al HaTorah is a work of such amazing scope. And this is what he writes in the preface. He quotes a Gemara. It's a frightening Gemara in Avodah Zarah. The Gemara is in Avodah Zarah, Daf Chof Amud Beis. We're going to learn it soon in the Daf Yomi. It's a fascinating Masechta. The Gemara says in Avodah Zarah on Daf Chof Amud Beis, Amar Alav ala Malach HaMavos. It says, describing the angel of death. Shekuloi molei anayim. It's a creature that's full of eyes. Ubeshas pitirasei shel adam, at the time when a person is dying, Oimid lamala mirashaisav, this creature comes above his head, v'char b'yishlufa b'yadai, with an outstretched sword, v'tipa shel mara tluya, and there's a drop of bile, of poison, on the sword. Kaven shachayla roya, I say, when he sees this creature full of eyes, mizdazeya, he gets terrified, upaiseach piv, he opens his mouth in terror, v'zorka l'seich piv, and he throws the bile into the person's mouth, mimena meis, from it the person dies, mimena masriach, from it the body starts to decompose, mimena panav marikes, from it the face starts turning greenish, yellowish. So the Chassam Sofer says, in the name of his great Rebbe, Reb Nosson Adler, what's this creature with eyes? What strange creature of eyes? So he says a scary thing. He says those eyes are from all the times that people looked at what they weren't supposed to. And when the person sees that, he gets so terrified, and it's from that he dies. And it's interesting that the Chassam Sofer puts this in the beginning of his work on Chumash, because this is the idea of Sur Mara v'asei tov. You have to remove yourself from evil, and only then you could do good. We need to purify our eyes. But now I'm going to share with you a very reassuring thought from the Aruch HaShulchan. I've known a lot of great people who held tremendously of the Aruch HaShulchan. My Rebbe Ramosha would quote the Aruch HaShulchan extensively. He held especially with Aruch HaShulchan was a Rav. Also, I know I had a zechiyah when I was younger to learn to hear shir from Rav Gershon Wiesenfeld. He was a young guy. He passed away young. But I remember also he would come to yeshiva and give us complicated shiurim. I heard shiurim from him on Bava Basra, on a parak Chardal, the second parak of Bava Basra. But he would sit and learn Aruch HaShulchan. It made an impression upon me how important the Aruch HaShulchan is. So the Aruch HaShulchan has a sefer of drushes. It's called Kol Ben Levi. In the third volume of his drushes, the Aruch HaShulchan says something very reassuring. He says, he says, a person might say, oh, I'm lost. I've looked at all kinds of things. The Shekhinah surely departed from me. I don't have a hope. And he says that's why the pasuk goes on to say, even though it says Asher Atem Zonim Achreim, yes, you've strayed after this. But the pasuk continues, still Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I'm still Hashem your God. Remember, Asher Eitzeisi Eschem Eretz Mitzrayim, I took you out of Mitzrayim, even though you sunk to the 49th degree of Tumah, a land full of promiscuity and lewdness and immorality. Even though if you would have stayed there another second after that chatzos, you wouldn't have been worthy to be redeemed. I'm still your God. So don't get buried in the guilt of the past, but rather look forward and look on controlling yourself forward. That's why we say this every day. We say this every day to make a new start. Don't be buried in what was done. What was done is done. Hashem says, still, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, I'm still Hashem your God. I took you out. I heard from this, my father told me over from the Chakal Yitzchak. The Heilige Spinker Rebbe Zechat Tzavik Kodesh Brachas Chusi Yagen Aleinu. We say this 2 times a day to remember Mitzrayim because it's a message of hope. Therefore, we have to know, and we should remember what Reb Zilberstein says over from the Shomer Amunim Rebbe, that every time we have a victory and we don't look, we create an Eis Ratzon, a time of favor. And at that moment we could ask Hashem for something. That's an incentive. Every time we don't look, every time we exercise self-control, that's a victory. It's an Eis Ratzon, and we could ask Hashem for a request. That's a reason to try to do so. Again, this is such an important share. I'm very grateful to the Rubin family. I'm grateful for all of you for joining me. We are looking for a sponsor. Next week's share, Shlach, Kairach, very important share on Kairach, will be broadcast from the Catskills. We're looking for a sponsor, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. Thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful Shabbos.